Another 30 seconds. Oh, we're live. We're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Data Innovators Exchange session. Today, it's an introduction to driving real business growth with data, analytics, and AI. I'm James Hartwright, a solutions partner at Ignition Data. And today, I have the pleasure of introducing someone who's doing some fascinating work at the intersection of business, technology, and data, Zjaén Coetzee. I hope I haven't mangled your name too much, Zjaén. Zjaén is the CTO of Nexus Data and co-inventor of the RAPPID Value Cycle, which we're going to talk a bit about today. First, in a series of webinars on realizing value from your data and the aligned processes with it. This session's a little bit of an introduction to the topic and a high-level overview of that aforementioned RAPPID Value Cycle. We'll follow that up if we have time, if Zjaén and I don't stop talking, with a few minutes of Q&A from any attendees. You should see in somewhere in there an area to drop comments and questions, so please post them in, and I'll pick out a few curly ones for Zjaén to answer at the end. Zjaén, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be up about and early. It's 6 a.m. local time in South Africa this morning. Nice and brisk morning. So looking forward to this morning's conversation.
Sure, and hopefully a cup of coffee somewhere there.
Yeah, I've got some tea, so I'm ready.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Where did RAPPID come from? And I've got it here. What drove you to write a book?
Sure. Yeah. No. So thanks for the question, James. So it's been a bit of a journey. I think myself and Carl got to a point where we got really frustrated with let's call it data leaders and the struggles that they face around not having budget, not having mandates, and really getting to a point where we had to do something. And one of those things was to write a book. It probably would have been a few other things as well. I think for those that know us also know that it was a bit of a therapeutic process as well, going through the motions and just putting pen to paper and understanding sort of the things that we've seen in our own careers, looking at what those gaps are, what the challenges are, the reasons why things are happening. And through all of this and noting it down, we got to the acronym of RAPPID. So for those that think we spelled RAPPID incorrectly, it's not. It's just the name of the framework. It's just abbreviation. And I think one of the best stories to perhaps explain the concept around RAPPID and the concept around data confidence is there's an old English word called spuddling, which effectively means is you're busy, but you're not adding any value. You're not actually doing anything. So busy work. And in the book, for those that haven't read it as well, you read the story about Carl visiting the Kruger National Park, and he decided to, let's call it a nosedive, into the pool and misjudged the depth of the pool by just a bit, and ended up hitting with diving nose first into a piece of concrete. And it being the national park and not probably having proper doctors and stuff, the local doctor at the park at that time had a look at him and said, "No, you look fine," gave him a few pain tablets, sent him home. And the next morning when he woke up, his entire nose has collapsed. So proper damage was done.
Wow.
And then he ended up having to go to hospital, and a specialist surgeon then reconstructed his entire nose. So if you see Carl today, it's got a beautiful nose. For those that haven't seen it, it is the work of a master, right? So it wasn't born that way. But in the story for us, it's really the analogy of the doctor is really those type of people that they do stuff, but they're not necessarily a specialist in what they do, and they don't necessarily add the value that we expect them to do because they're not necessarily the experts. And this typically we find within the data world as well. You have a lot of data leaders that's spuddling, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and why do you think that the data leaders are struggling to get real results from their data process, things that help the business?
Yeah, I think the main reason is it's not understanding the concept of value and why we do things, right? So a lot of people get involved in chasing hype, chasing technology. And it's very difficult. As a data leader, it's very, very difficult because there's new things that comes out every other day. AI has got so many permutations being launched every other week. There's flavors of the month. I think the last time I checked, it was agentic AI, but I'm sure that has changed again. And they really struggle to sort of take that knowledge and bring it back to the business. And what happens is they focus so much on just solving problems and solving symptoms that they don't really address the root cause, but also not speaking back to value. And for us, we've seen that a lot of them struggle to deliver the results because of that. That's the first thing. Secondly is their peers, the rest of the C-suite, the rest of the senior leadership teams are not data confident. They don't have the confidence in asking the right questions, challenging decisions that's being made or investments that's being made. And because of this, it ends up sort of becoming a finger-pointing exercise at the end of the day.
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, that stat there that you got up on screen, 80% of analytics and AI projects still fail to deliver outcomes. Yeah, that pinning back to those measures, yes, is an important part. So when you say measurable outcomes and results, what does that actually mean in reality when, if we're talking to data leaders to know, hey, you need to change, you need to refocus, what actually are we driving towards?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is to understand the reason why we're doing things and being able to measure that. And then the context and sort of the principle that we use in RAPPID is we start with what we refer to as value generating initiatives. So instead of starting with, we want to build this AI model or we need to do this because somebody else has done it, we fundamentally look at why do we need to solve for the business, right? So business would typically have KPIs or strategic objectives or directives that says we need to increase revenue by X within a certain segment for our business in order to survive, right? So it's something very clear from a business perspective. What we then do is we break that down and we say what are the foundational things that you need to put in place in order to speak to that value, enable that value for that value case. Now the realization that we saw is, and the reason why a lot of these projects actually fail, is that the objective wasn't clear in the first place, and the objective wasn't value. The objective was probably more than likely linked to let's enable something, or let's do something, or we need this so that we can do X, Y, and Z, or we're implementing a new ERP, and because of this, we need to have a data platform, as an example.
Yeah.
And not really clearly thinking about what's the determinate business value that we'll get from making this investment. And once, or if they don't have that as their true North Star, whatever you want to call it, the problem is that they end up delivering something that doesn't really deliver value. And then we see the cycle where an investment gets made. 12 to 16 months later, the CFO says, listen, it's all good and well that we made this investment, we spent this money. I'm not seeing any return on this. I'm not seeing any business value from this. And what ends up happening is they then pull funding, or they limit funding to a great extent, and then you end up losing talent, you lose the platform at the end of the day, or you just have a very clunky, very expensive thing that just sort of, it now becomes this appendage that you just need to live with, but it's not really adding any value to anyone's life at the end of the day.
Yeah. So, taking that customer churn example, so would an example be, right, I've got my KPIs for churn, but I'm not actually working out what the drivers of those are. And so if it drops, there's no actionable change.
Yeah. I mean, churn is such a good example where, for instance, I mean, it's if you technically, let's call it, we're solving for churn, but if you're solving for churn, you're actually solving for, revenue protection at the end of the day, right? So you want to protect the revenue that you're supposed to make and the customers that you already have on your books, because, most companies, I'm not sure of all falls in this space, but it's almost always more expensive to onboard a new customer than it is to retain the existing ones.
Yeah.
So that's what you're really solving for from a value perspective. You're not just solving for churn, you're actually solving for a more complex business value component. But if we sort of take it a step further, is to say, but now that, typically what would happen is like, let's build the churn model. Okay, cool, we build it. And then we get to business and we say, okay, well, now you have the churn model, you need to do something. And then they didn't think about what the next action or the next step is now that they have the churn model. Like, what do I now do with this analytics? So you've given them the actionable insight, but they're actually not delivering anything on it. And once you've passed the business chasm, then the next one is for IT, like now we need to implement something on the systems to operationalize this churn model to proactively retain customers. And then IT says, well, thank you for coming, but who's going to pay for this? We've got so many other things on our radar that we need to focus on and that you need to prioritize. We need to do security updates and patches and quarterly releases. And, now you're coming with a very complex problem that we need to implement, and nobody's informed us about this. So, having all of that, taken into account, that's the value chain. It's not just, solving for churn. It's a bit more complex than one would thought. But once you start thinking that way, in the rapid way, it just helps you to unpack value a bit better.
Yeah, right. And so, onto that. So that rapid cycle. So it feels like quite a mindset shift in thinking of all of those levers, end-on processes, how rapid, how is that going to help you move to that new way of thinking, new way of working?
Yeah, cool. No, so I think let's talk to the visual. Maybe this would make a bit more sense than most people like me. Like, we picture people. We need to see the bigger picture. If we look at the 4 quadrants, right? So the first one is really the preparing to invest stage, which I think most companies do get right. They do, most people are good at spending money. That's the big thing. But preparing to invest is really the approach about understanding why are you making the investment in the first place, what that investment will entail, and is the expected value that you're making more than that investment that you need to put in. So effectively justifying that investment. But it also looks at understanding, are you actually ready for that investment? Because sometimes you have the funds and you have the means, but as an organization, there's just too many other things, too many other focuses that will detract and from the ability to realize value for that specific use case. So that's really the preparing to invest bit. Now, once you've prepared to invest and you've identified what you need, the next bit is now acquiring these skills and platforms and people and approaches to actually deliver that insight. So this is almost what the industry refers to as delivering the actionable insight. And for many, that's where it stops. For many customers and many people, actionable insights is where the journey stops. But that's effectively where the value journey almost begins. That's almost the value enablement component of it. So that sort of happens in the delivering insight stage. And again, a lot of people get that right. That to some extent, they are able to build platforms, bring people in, build some fancy dashboards and models and those type of things. The challenge that we then foresee is, and this is sort of leading then towards quadrant 3, is the ability to apply this insight. So now applying the insights, it's back to my previous example where you now have a churn model and you need to get the business teams and the IT teams involved in embedding this churn model back into business so that you can now actually drive automated decision making. And when we're talking about decision making, it's not somebody sitting on a chair looking at a dashboard, having to say yes or no. In the world that we live in, decisions are automated, right? So it's in the machine. Somebody's working on an application and the app says, listen, we need to do this with this customer. Or automatically send out this mailer or SMS or whatever it might be to the customer to drive that interaction. And that's the applying of the insights bit, because that's where the value then starts to happen, is when you actually do something about it. But very few customers do that. We haven't really seen too many customers doing that. And that's sort of the core reason behind the RAPPID methodology, is to provide data value assurance, right? So providing that assurance framework for data value. The 4th quadrant is the interesting one. And because not a lot of people are doing the applying insights bit, very few to no one is doing the recognizing value component of this, right? So some people are tracking value. But if we talk about tracking value, we break it down into a few steps. And the first one there is value attribution. And value attribution really is, if I now need to increase my let's call it value generated from churn from $100 million to $200 million, where do I need to make additional investment? Do I need to invest more in my data platform, in my data skills? Do I need to acquire additional data to make my churn model more robust? Do I need to invest on the business side and the call center side, whatever it might be? So between business data and IT, where do I make that investment? And with our data value assurance approach, within the RAPPID framework, we help customers identify where those areas are. Where do you need to invest? Because typically people will just throw more money at either all three to say, we need to increase, our value from churn. So let's just appoint more data scientists and, add 10 more people into the call center and, configure more IT systems or buy more licenses. And at the end of the day, probably, more than likely, only one of those levers needs more investment in order to see the uplift for that value. And that's really what the rapid value cycle is about. And I mean, it's in that fourth quadrant, it then leads towards us. Either we say, well, we've now maximized the value from that investment. We need to find a new one, a new opportunity for value, or we can reinvest and then go through the cycle again, reinvesting into that value case, going through it, making sure that we actually deliver the value. And I think the key bit here is to continuously measure that value and not do it once every quarter, once every 6 months, or even annually. And the reason why we say that is if you I think most people hopefully online knows the concept of cricket. If you don't, you have to watch a YouTube video afterwards to understand this. But if you look at run rates within cricket, I have the run rate that I have now, and then I have my expected run rate to win the game. So it's the same thing here with value. We have our value run rate, and then we've got our expected value run rate. And if we continuously measure it, we can see after month 3, after month 4, listen, we're not nearly close to where we need to be in terms of realizing the value that we're supposed to. Where do we need to change some things up and pull some levers in order to get the run rate back up again, in order to get to that point of value? It also helps pull the plug early in investments where sometimes it was just a lot more complex than what you anticipated. So instead of spending a year's worth of money on it, now you can pull the plug after a month or 2 months to say, but this thing is not going to work. We scoped it, but we probably missed something somewhere along the line.
Yeah, I'm probably going to take and hurt your example there in. So I've talked for many years in the consulting mode, like actionable insights. We need actionable insights, but getting that in. So that thing of working on the cricket over 3 months, we're looking at there's an opposing team who keep on bowling googlies, and we never managed to recover off the back of googlies. And so if you haven't got a plan that says, hey, we're seeing googlies, and so now we need to train up and have a process that says, when you see what might go googly, like change your grip, change your position. And so actionable insights is of no value unless you've got something that you've sort of prepared or are ready for or can bring in that enables you to action that. And then that secondary thing okay, we put it in. Is it working? Yes, it's working for all of these players, but this guy over here, he's never going to get it. So maybe we drop him from the team. So I've stretched the analogy, I think, to
that's brilliant.
but yeah, that thing of taking those insights, embedding them in, getting them into the process, having them as things in your toolkit, but then also measuring those. I can see that. And I'll just grab another piece. So you started on that prepare to invest part, which is, hey, we haven't got a data platform. We need a data platform. Is it always at that level, or can we go into ever decreasing circles and pick smaller and smaller and smaller pieces?
Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes it's not just about the data platform. Sometimes it's like one step lower, where it's not just about it's any type of investment, right? It's if you want to make a tweak on a certain thing, so you can actually break it down into that lower blocks. It's not always the big thing. I mean, it's to be honest, if you think about and we almost have sort of C2 customers. We have customers that's already on the journey and customers that's new to the journey. And customers that's already on the journey more than likely already have a data platform, and more than likely might already have teams. But that doesn't mean that they don't need to invest in enabling certain use cases. So in those instances, we need to go a bit deeper and understand what are the additional components that they need in order to realize that value. That one level lower, 2 levels lower type scenario. So it might be a capability on the data platform that didn't exist before, or it might be a configuration or a script that needs to be developed or enabled in order to actually get to that point of value. So it's not always just the I'm doing this for the first time scenario. There's also we've already embarked on this journey. We're fairly mature, but we feel there's certain things that we need to do, and I think just shifting the mind a bit around. And specifically in mature organizations, this becomes a bit more difficult because at some point you sort of forget why you did what you did. You forget why you made the investment in the platform or the people, the processes, whatever it might be. Through the RAPPID lens, to a greater extent, it just helps you, focus again. So, but if we need to make any changes going forward, any additional investment, let's look at it from a value perspective, and then only focus on those things that really drive value, those subcomponents. And sometimes, I mean, it's James, it's not even platforms and people. Sometimes it's just shifting the approach that you're using, adopting a new approach. If you weren't agile, maybe looking at agile. If you're already on agile, is there a different permutation of agile that you can possibly use? So it's actually quite wide. And that's why in the book we sort of split it up between people, processes, and approach, so you can understand the components and the levers, the sub levers. That you can pull to increase value.
Cool. And I see on that slide you've pulled out the 10 steps, and there are a number of frameworks in there, and I'm about at that point in the book. So do I have to bring all of those together to get to those real results? Are there certain places, certain things that I could pick, or groundwork that I should really get embedded before I dig down?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, James. So I think all things being equal, there's many frameworks in the book. So for first-time readers or people that are exploring it, you might get lost. So I almost want to split it up into two components. The one is what you're looking at now is it's really that preparing to invest component around the 5 R's framework and ETH mapping, and I'll unpack that in a bit more in detail now. The second part of it is depending on where you are on your journey and what levers you need to pull. As an example, if you need to focus on platform as an example, then you almost start with these two and then you jump directly to platform. You don't need to consider all the other ones, right? So that although they are interrelated, you almost have I think if I remember correctly, we actually have this section in the book that we recommend how you go about reading the book. And sort of in what order you read it, because this is the cool thing is, with Drive Rapid Results, you don't have to read it in the exact order that it was written. You can actually skip chapters and go back to chapters, whatever it might be, depending on your need. But the two fundamental frameworks, I think, to contextualize value is really important around the 5 R's and the ETH mapping framework. And the process that we have there it's really the 10 steps, and they're not very complex steps, but they're very important steps. The first one is to do the evaluation of, is your organization actually ready to make this investment and to get the value from this investment? And there's certain things that you need to check there. Secondly is once you now have done that evaluation, is to really understand, do you have a suitable person or individual internally that we refer to as a ringleader? It's not a bad thing. It's not a mafia boss or anyone like that, or a hitman. It's somebody that has influence and that can clearly articulate, specifically if you're a data leader that isn't able to clearly articulate value or why you need to do something. The ringleader is the person that helps you bring that message home to the powers that be and the investors and the rest of the people that you need to get support from. And so firstly is understanding the organization, how ready you are. Secondly is then finding that ringleader. And then thirdly is the process around identifying those value generating initiatives. What are the key things that your business needs to do or is focused on that will really drive value and impact for your business? And here we are very pedantic about it to a great extent. What are those determinate things? Because we always go back to the warm and fluffy feelings and, but we can do this and we can enable this. So we try and steer the wording away to say, but if you enable something, what is it that you're actually solving for? Or what is it that you're actually enabling? So if you're enabling this, surely there should be some value down the line. So that's really the concept around identifying those value generating initiatives. Once those ones have been identified, you then go and select those value generating initiatives and you go through the potential results of value extract. So this is actually going into the VGIs and looking at what's the potential that they have to deliver value. And once you have a view of what that is, you only select the high impact VGIs. Some organizations have 20 to 30 of these. Obviously, you can't focus on all of them at the same time. You can't invest in all of them at the same time. So even there, we take a subset of a subset to identify what are those high impact value generating initiatives. And then we go back to looking at what's the leadership readiness. If we give them these VGIs and we need to make this work, is the leadership able to influence decisions based on results? So can they, if we give them insights, or we give them KPIs or analytics or models, are they able to influence the results at all from a leadership perspective? So effectively, it's, are they ready to do something if we give them something? That's an influence. Then from there, we obviously only focus on driving that high impact VGIs from a roadmap perspective. So we put together a roadmap to say, for the next 12 to 24 months, these are the things that you need to focus on from a value generating initiative perspective. And now at this point, it becomes very pivotal, because then we also need to add in the foundational initiatives. So what are the key things that you need in order to make that value work, or to realize that value? And foundational initiatives here can literally be establishing a new governance forum. It can be something like you need to have a new scorecard in place. So all the basic, let's call it the building blocks that you need that will help you get to the high impact VGIs. And then the next step is, now once you have that roadmap and you have your VGIs and the foundational things that you need, then you overlay what's the requirements, the delivery resource requirements that you need to make this work. So I need some platform, I need some people, I need some approach, I might need some consultancy coming in, I might need some IT configuration, some business process changes, as an example. And that gives us a view of the investment that's required alongside these returns. And then the last step there is ROI. So this is where we then forecast returns and the investment. So this is the fundamental, most important bit for the value discussion is, if you want to see data as an asset, it needs to hold a future value. And the only way to really get to that future value is to do proper forecasting on it. So we don't just identify the VGI to say, hey, thumbs up, this is how much we think it's going to get to. It's, we need to clearly articulate and forecast what that value is going to be over time, over the same time that the investment needs to be made. And how it's going to be tracked going forward. And that sort of sets the scene and the baseline then for all conversation going forward. So at this point, readers will know what the next step is that they need to focus on, and depending on step 9, where they have identified what those delivery resources are. So do they now need to spend time on platform? Do they need to spend time on the people component, or on the approach, or a combination thereof?
Yeah. Cool. And looking at that ringleader role, where does that normally come from in the business?
Yeah, so we've seen CFOs being really good ringleaders, although they're also many cases our stakeholders, key stakeholders, and sponsors for the projects. But it's a bit of a mixed bag, James. So I would say senior executive, C-suite, or one level lower, because you obviously need somebody that has influence at that level. But surprisingly enough, in some organizations, we've seen people in middle management being able to drive influence at the executive as well as board levels. Cool. So it's if you have to identify that person, you just need to pay attention around who's leading conversations and who's influencing conversations, because that person more than likely would be the ideal candidate for a ringleader.
Yeah, cool. And that ROI piece, I like that. I've worked many years in the marketing side, and the number of campaigns we ran that didn't have how we're going to measure that this campaign was a success or not. So looking at that ROI and measuring it through, as you say, not just hey, we've got it in and then we've done it, and back to the cycle that we've actually embedded it, that it's actually, it's driving, it's increasing and not fading away. That the pieces in around there. I'm also interested in that piece that you've gone high impact VGIs that are actually there for a 12, 24 month period. That this, this I've just got, this is like really strong, high metrics that we're looking at in driving. This isn't a fire and forget type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think and we've had some interesting conversations this week with customers as well. And the default is, once you understand value a bit, there's almost like a secondary line of defense that you need to break down. And the secondary line of defense is, hey, it would be cool if we could do this. You typically, now that you realize you can actually drive impact, you start focusing on the things that's not necessarily cool to your organization. That's not a priority. The reason why we're focusing on the high impact VGIs and not all of them, in a general sense, is this is a long-term commitment. And if it's not aligned to where the company is going and their strategy, what would end up happening is you're going to embark on this journey, and then 4 months down the line, people are going to lose interest, and they're going to start focusing on the things that really drives the business. And I mean, and unfortunately, sometimes these are the unsexy, the uncool things like cost reduction, which is very important for organizations these days, specifically, in the economy that we're living in. People are really looking at where they're spending their money. So if one of your VGIs is tied towards that, you're almost, assured that for the next 12 to 24 months, this thing is going to get the focus that it needs. But if you're in a cost sensitive segment and your VGI says, let's spend more money to drive crazy innovation, more than likely, like after a month or 2 months, people are going to say, well, this was a cool idea, but we don't really have the funds to do this. We make this statement in the book that we say, you can't save your way to greatness. And this is now almost on the inverse side of this, is to say, but at some point you're going to have to make an investment. You can't always just cut cost and reduce headcount and reduce platforms and reduce stuff and expect yourself to move forward or propel forward and really be competitive in the market. At some point, you'll need to put a stake in the ground to say, I'm willing to bet on this. I'm willing to invest in this to realize that value. That will just help me, just be that little bit better off than what I am today.
Yeah, cool. So covered the left-hand side on the 5 R's. What about the IF-MAPI part?
So I'm going to break down the IF-MAPI framework, I think, in a bit more detail. So if we're looking at preparing to invest, the first 2 bits that you sort of touch on is the identify value, forecasting value, but the journey doesn't stop there. So for those that have taken a mental picture of the RAPPID Value Cycle, will remember sort of what quadrant 1 looks like at a low level, but I sort of want to blow it up a bit, and then we're going to go into one of the other quadrants as well. So in our world, we see IF-MAPI playing out in 2 domains. Firstly is identifying and forecasting that value. And then the last one is in our quadrant 4, where we're going to measure or improve that value, is where then the rest of the IF-MAPI framework comes into play. The entire concept is still the same. And this is also the glue that holds the entire RAPPID Value Cycle together. So if we go through sort of that 10 steps that we mentioned, is identifying the readiness, finding a ringleader, getting the VGIs, etc. So that's through the process, but you'll then see that there's 2 components of IF-MAPI in there. The first one is identifying those VGIs, and then the second one is forecasting that value for high impact VGIs. And this is really the important bit, is in that logical flow, is at the starting point before you even make any investments, is making sure that you've identified the right stuff. You've gone through the process of attaching the values and the priorities, and then you have that ability to then forecast this, so that you can actually get to the point of establishing what your ROI should look like. In this image, you also see that we have this little picture of the CFO, the primary gatekeeper that's holding the keys to unlocking the value. Is your finance director, chief financial officer, head of finance, whatever it might be, is the person that needs to have assurance that if we're going to be spending this money, that we're going to see some form of return for it. And being able to clearly articulate that is really where IF-MAPI comes in. So for those that have not read the book or don't understand the concept, so Carl, my co-author, is a CA by trade, although he's not your typical CA. He's very much a data guy at heart, but with the fine skills of a CFO. And one of the key things as we were writing the book that we've identified as a point of failure is that CFOs are the ones that don't necessarily understand, what these investments are. Things just land on their desk and they say, let's go and do it. This first portion helps the CFO understand why the investment is being made, and they also now have that assurance to say, but if I approve this, if I'm putting my stamp and my signature on it, I know that I'm going to be getting some value from this because it's clearly articulated, it's well thought through, but it's also driving that accountability to say, but we've now committed to this as an organization, right? So when they're sitting in those boardroom meetings, he can be the constant reminder and the voice of sanity that will prevail and say, listen, we made this collective commitment. Why is everyone not participating in realizing this value? Because that's the other side of this is once something has been committed to, you need to see this through in order to get to that point of value. If you stop halfway through, the value is not going to realize. So that's the quadrant 1. If we then jump to quadrant 4, so for those that's following with, so it's that in the preparing to invest bit, we've got delivering insights, applying insights. The 4th quadrant is around recognizing value, and this is sort of where the bigger part of if MAPI then plays out. Is the first component is that measuring value, so measuring the value that gets generated from these VGIs, continuously doing that value attribution. So this is the value that's coming in. This is the components that we're assigning that value to. So business, well done. You've contributed 20%. IT, you've contributed 40%. Data, you've contributed 40%. So that you know where that comes in. Value attribution can happen at multiple layers. Some customers preferring doing it at the highest level layer. That just to say, business, IT, and data, I just want to know collectively. What are they contributing towards value enablement, and who's driving the most value, so that I know where I can reinvest. Other organizations, however, are going down 2 or 3 levels lower to understand which components within business or which components within the data function. So is it my data scientists, my data engineers? Is it certain models that's driving this value? Because for them, value attribution to that nth degree is important, because when they're making an investment, they're making it down to that level. They're not doing departmental funding to a great extent. They're very concise and precise around where they're making that investment and spending money. So that's the value attribution component of it. Now, once it's been measured, it's been attributed, the next part is the publishing component of it. And you'll see like there's a little image on there for those that want to check out the website, rappidvaluecycle.com. You'll see that there's something that we refer to as a data income statement. And what the data income statement then does is it gives you this holistic view of what are my priority initiatives. So the VGIs that I've now prioritized, which of these VGIs that I've prioritized am I now actually executing against? So which ones are currently in flight that investment has been made against? What was that investment that was made? And what is my current return on that investment? It also showcases the value attribution component of it. So it will break down, say, for these initiatives, this is the value being attributed to the respective departments, and you'll have a clear view of who's contributing what. And it might not mean that in all instances, all 3 parties are involved. Sometimes it might be the data team and business only. Sometimes it might be data and IT. It differs depending on the use case. But in essence, there's always more than one party involved, and almost always data involved, because this is why we're driving results and value from data. It's, without the data, the value doesn't really happen. And then you also have a view around what that forecasted trend is. So that run rate that I was speaking about, that's typically the thing that you will then showcase on your data income statement, is to show this is the value that we're expecting. This is the value that we're tracking against. So you've got a holistic view of overall initiatives, and then you can double click and drill down and actually then see, well, one level lower, this initiative is tracking well, these other 2 aren't. So you know that, if you need to channel funding where it needs to go, don't invest more in the ones that's not delivering the value that you're expecting. And then the fundamental, the bit that is let's call it the piece de la resistance, is that ability to improve the value. So now that you've published it and it's visible and people can see it, the next thing that you want to do is be able to improve that value. So it's not just measuring the value, where we have seen customers, for instance, measuring value for that data and analytics and AI investments. one thing that they seldomly do is have the ability to improve, or actually doing any or applying any efforts to actually improving that value at the end of the day. They sort of like, we've implemented it, we're measuring it, it's done. but that improvement part is so critical and so important, because it means is that you can get more out of your investment than what you initially anticipated. And if you don't, it helps you just continuously invest smarter. So, for most organizations going through this rapid value cycle process once, it's really a learning curve, an education curve. So I think, the one concept that we speak about is being data confident or data confidence. We try and shy away from things like data literacy, because then, if you're not data literate, it means that you're data illiterate, and you can't call the senior leaders illiterate. It doesn't, they don't take to it well. But it also doesn't really clearly articulate the problem, right? So I mean, it's the concept around confidence is yes, I know this, right? So let's go through the rapid value cycle once. People have read the book, they've been on the journey with us for a couple of months, they've seen the frameworks, they've applied it once. And through that process, they did it. When it started out, they didn't have the confidence to forecast value, to measure value, to attribute it, to publish it. But as this muscle starts to develop, and you're spending more time on it, and you're doing it more, and you're understanding how it works, you're actually now applying that knowledge. All of a sudden, you start building confidence. And now, if I wake you up like 2 o'clock in the morning and say, listen, we need to do data value assurance, you know exactly what we're going to do. It's not a first time thing. Similar to James, to our cricket analogy, it's if you have a batsman coming out for his first time for his national team, like it's his first cap, and he doesn't have that confidence yet to play at that level, unless he's one of those very few that just has natural talent, and confidence doesn't really come into play. But we can see where there's lack of confidence. On the other side, maybe a different analogy that's a bit easier is, when somebody steps out of a Formula 2 car into a Formula 1 car, is the massive difference in confidence that you need, right, to go faster, and just everything is just different. But after 1 or 2 or 3 races, you start building up the confidence. You know what you can do. You can push the limits, stretch the limits. It's very much the same in here. Is data confidence plays such an important role in the ability to improve value generated from VGIs. And for us, data confidence is the thing that we want to install into the leadership teams within organizations, and equip them with the knowledge and the know-how, and let's call it everything that they need in their toolkit to really become confident.
And you've killed off my next 2 questions. Is how do you know succeeded on that first run, and do you have to iterate? And the answer is, well, it's in the ROI, and that's it's a cycle, it's a circle. So that bit around, I think that the key of, I'm looking at something I expected an ROI, and I'm not getting that ROI, digging down into where and what, and then not just going, oh, let's redouble, but actually come and look at it and go, is this, have we gone around it slightly the wrong way? Is it still as valuable before we send it round the cycle again? I think a good piece. And the other thing I can see is also that thing of the data confidence is, once you've been through a few times, and or started providing back those measures and how they've impacted, that confidence level will lift and lift and lift. I'm going to jump out into one of my further questions, since you answered the 2 that I had. Everywhere I go, data quality with AI and agentic and etc. And data quality, if you've ever worked in data, how much does that data quality part play into your measuring value or working out what the ROI might be?
So there's a few, let's call it, points at which data quality really plays a big role, James. So I think the first obvious one is, if you need to, let's call it, let's use the churn analogy again. If you need to do churn modeling, if your customer data is incorrect, and your behavioral information about your customer isn't correct, you're not able to link various data sets together to get that holistic view of behavior from a customer perspective, then obviously the output of that model would just be very poor. And which means is, you're never going to realize the value that you need, or that you expected from the investment in the first place. So one of the most important areas to actually invest in is that concept around data quality and improving it. So foundationally, if you start scoping your value generating initiative in your foundational initiatives, more than likely one of those components is going to be we need to focus on data quality and then improving the data quality overall. Now, the benefit here of doing it this way is that not all data is created equal. Not data is some companies try and fix all their data and get all their data right, and all their data like 100%, and it's nice and shiny and we know where it is and it's nicely labeled and there's metadata, reference data, whatever. But in this instance, it helps you zone in to say, but what is the core pieces, the attributes of data that's really important and critical for the organization that we can focus on. Now this actually goes through our delivering insights component, right? So that second quadrant, and within delivering insights, there's yet another framework that we refer to as breadth. Now, the breadth framework it's almost like the holistic view of what data trust looks like. So we're almost taking data quality that one step further to say it's not just about the quality of the data, but it's also about the availability thereof, the trust that you assign to it. So yes, I'm giving you the accurate information. You can see it, but do you actually trust what you're seeing? Are you confident enough to actually make a decision based on what I'm giving you? We talk about aspects such as transparency and lineage as well, to say, if I'm showing you a certain measure or a figure, I can clearly articulate where this came from. A lot of people are onto data lineage these days, and they just want to show lineage for the sake of showing lineage. But what's important for a key decision maker or somebody that needs to programmatically configure decisions is to say, if this calculation is going to be used in driving a customer's yes or no, or yes, we're going to contact them, or no, we're not, or yes, we're going to give them discount, or no, we're not. We need to understand how that calculation came to be and what fields are being used to get to that point of calculation. Yep. And then likewise, what is the accuracy and the completeness and all the fancy data quality things that data field needs to conform to in order for this calculation to be correct. So that also sits within that breadth framework. And then just lastly, I think one of the big things for us is the business context, because not all companies have the same definitions for the same things. Even within the same, let's call it industries, organizations will sometimes use internal verbiage for certain things that nobody else uses. Is to understand that business context that I'm applying, which comes with the rules and the filters and the criteria that I need to put on top of it. So if I'm showing you this figure, you need to know that these filters have been applied, these rules have been applied. So it's not just a raw number or figure from a source system somewhere. There's some preemptive work that's gone into getting you to this number. And that entire concept around data quality is really the important bit, because once you generate the insights, other than just the data being accurate and complete and timeous, we also need to make sure that people trust what they're seeing. And that trust is really the foundation then for everything else. So, if we go through that process, it's usually people platform approach, and then the data bit is the absolute important stage gate before you're going into embedding that insights, applying it within your organization.
Yeah. So the churn example worked in one organization where we had the soft churn term, which was just what you talked about. Is somebody calls up and says, "Hey, I want to cancel my subscription," and it's like, is there something that I could do to help you? And it's like, that your contribution to charity X is going to drop off, and it's like a little save. But that soft churn, they never tracked what happened a month or 2 months after that soft churn, or at least initially. And so, making sure everybody understands what churn is and the processes we've gone through, because that absolutely will affect any sort of ROI, any sort of the things that you want to track. I
mean, churn is such a good example. Early in my career, one of the very first models that I built was a churn model, and we had this very similar to the soft churn example, James. Is there was a debate around what constitutes churn. Is it product churn or customer churn? Because one customer can have multiple products. So are they churning the product, or is the customer leaving? And at which points do we classify it as being the customer having left? If it's one customer with one line and they cancel the one line, is it then customer churn, or isn't it? So I think even, it's in those basic examples, it highlights the importance of understanding the business context when you're applying sort of these data rules.
Indeed, yeah. And yeah, that and aligned with that is that confidence that we all know what we're talking about when we say churn. That when we're looking at that ROI, everybody's going, "Oh yeah, I understand how that's made up and what we're thinking of." So yeah, that's good. There's a great set of stuff there. So if this has sparked anybody's interest in RAPPID, what can they do next? Oh, look, there you go. You've got it already prepared. I knew that.
Cool. Yeah, so I think, it's just some practical next steps is we will also share a link during the call now. One of our team members will share it. But the most important bit that you can do is to scan the QR code either at the top of the screen or on the little digital image of the phone there to just register and showcase your interest in an in-person event. So the plan, as James mentioned, is there's going to be a series of these masterclasses and discussions that will lead up to an actual physical in-person event, full one-day event, where we will be going into these concepts into a lot more detail, and actually take people through the entire process of identifying those VGIs all the way through to actually tracking their value, in enabling and equipping them with the knowledge that they need to just be, let's call it, agents of value to a great extent.
Cool. Got a couple of questions from the floor. So the first one from Steve. Have you got an example of a high value VGI that you saw adopted, and anything that any evidence that was then recognized within the business?
Yeah. So I think, it's to almost set the scene is, I think with most of the customers where we've gone through this journey, it's they haven't really thought about value at all. I think that was the first sort of realization for it. They haven't really thought about certain initiatives in a certain way. I think for us, one of the probably the biggest cases for value was with one of our retail customers. Is we came in and this approach that we take where we sort of do a bit of strategic value planning around understanding where the VGIs are coming from and we need to spend some money. And this is going to be this is a very simple example where for them repeatability and reuse is really a big thing, for them within the organization, right? So they're very cost sensitive. So one of the things is how do we improve operational efficiency? So what does that look like? So it's not just about the pure cost, but just doing things better for the sake of doing it. And as part of that VGI process, the key thing that came up was to say, but they're missing one single role in the entire data landscape. There was one role missing, and that's a data modeler. And because they didn't have a data modeler, everything that they have to build, they have to rebuild every single time. And that constitutes increased cost, increased effort, all those type of things. And for them, they saw a 30 to 40% improvement once they start bringing in that resource. And this was a fairly big one for them in that essence. It's with other customers within the motor industry space. Their core VGIs is really around optimizing the entire, let's call it, supply chain, getting the vehicles in through the entire process all the way through to selling them off at the end of the day. And the core VGIs there that's, for instance, solved for is really about, we need to increase our revenue by 30%. We have no other option as to do it. How do we do that? Yeah. And the best way to do that for them was by just managing their cost base and making sure that they're more effective. They can get the right vehicles to things at the right time. And the value realization now is like they've always thought that they had a supply chain problem, but they actually had a value problem. And now that they're focusing on value, everything that they're doing, they're looking at it through a lens of, well, we need to generate value at the end of the day.
Cool. And then one from Jonathan, back to the prepare to invest part. So how does that stage change when it's 90% time from the current team and not about, hey, it's an amount paid for something? And I'm assuming that's, hey, in relation to a product paid.
Yeah. It's so investment can take many shapes and forms, right? So if you have, let's use that. And I think that's a very good example. We already have a team. They're already focusing on business as usual. don't really have too much spare capacity. So what now needs to happen is, if you're making this investment, we're saying we're going with a big bet. We need to build something new, but we can't afford to appoint new people, which means is we need to reshuffle the priorities of the existing resources. Now, if you're lucky enough and working in an organization where that team is really delivering value and you're tracking value and you know that they're actually adding value, then it becomes a bit more difficult to say, well, we're going to reduce, the effort on other things by 20%.
Yep.
But, in personal experience, it's going to be people are going to shout about stuff, but you're not going to have too much of an impact to say, but we need to get approval of allocating X amount of hours. And this can be a gradual thing, right? You never start out with a team that is over allocated. Give them a new project and say that 50% of your time you're going to be spending on this. Choose a sub-component of that VGI that you can enable to prove that initial value and prove the concept of value. And if once that works, then you can start saying, well, we've allocated 5% to this project. We're already starting to see an uplift and improvement. Let's move it up to 10% and 15% to see if that makes any difference at the end of the day. Because obviously those resources are limited, and capacity as well.
Yeah. And I'm also sort of inferring from there, once you've gone through that value cycle and said, hey, that 10% gave us so much more, you might actually get the opportunity to bring in another team member, and because you know the return on investment for them.
And I mean, that's not the reason why we do this, James, but that is one of the fundamental benefits of using RAPPID is you now have justification for investment. So if you as a data leader typically struggled with mandate and budget and these type of things, this is going to open a highway of discussions for you with the C-suite to say, well, I've proven I can do this with these many people. Give me 2 or 3 additionally. It helps grease the wheels for those conversations significantly.
Yeah, cool. I think we're pretty close to time. As Zjaén said, we are both going to be back in about 10 days, and there are 4 more after this through to Christmas. So a nice gift wrapped thing ready for Christmas in leading us in hopefully to you coming to those in-person events. But yes, if you've found something interesting in here, then continue to subscribe and join us, or just register and watch at your leisure. But I'd like to thank Zjaén for the hour he's given us already, and looking forward to more.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Thanks all.
Yes. Bye.